3 weeks of NFL action have just gone underway and we're about to enter a fourth. Here's the most surprising team from every division, and surprising could either mean surprisingly good or surprisingly bad. Let's start with the AFC, specifically the AFC East. And as much as many people are going to expect me to talk about the Jets and the Aaron Rodgers injury, I want to start this video on a positive note, and that's with the Dolphins being the most surprising team so far in the AFC East. And while Tua was technically expected to do great things, I certainly was not expecting potential MVP material this season. And yet here we are. He's pretty much one of the top favorites so far for AP MVP. And sure, there's a long NFL season ahead, so I don't want to jump to conclusions, but the numbers speak for themselves. As of this recording, he has an 82.9 quarterback rating, which is first in the league by the way, a 71.3% completion rating, and we can't forget about the Dolphins' monstrous win over the Broncos 70-20. Speaking of which, it's the AFC West. The most surprising team in the AFC West is the Denver Broncos. What exactly is going on here? Yeah, it's easy to glance over the 0-3 record and just start clowning on this team, but I think there's some deeper issues than just a poor start to the season. Russell Wilson is now a part of 2 Broncos blowouts, from dishing one out in Super Bowl 48 to being a part of one in week 3 of this season. And yeah, Russ could certainly be doing better, but is it all his fault for the Broncos' failures so far? Are people being too harsh just calling him a system quarterback doing well with the Seahawks system? Are they being too harsh just calling him washed and out of his prime? Can he bounce back? It's tough to say. The Broncos did give up more points in week 3 alone than 18 other NFL teams so far this season. I won't blame him specifically for the Broncos defense allowing 70 points. And hey, at least they faced the Bears on October 1st, which also surprisingly, the Chicago Bears still have a worse point differential than the Broncos, including that blowout loss. Only the Bears can pull such an amazingly embarrassing stat. Next up, we got the AFC North. I'll start my AFC North segment by saying, yeah, I'm a Browns fan, and nothing the Browns can do will surprise me, win, lose, or draw. I'm completely numb to anything Cleveland sports. With that being said, this whole division seems to be the most unpredictable, but I did not expect the Bengals to be at the bottom of the rankings, that's for sure. So they are my most surprising team for this division. Just 2 seasons ago, they were in the Super Bowl, and sure, a lot can change in 2 seasons, but I did not expect Joe Burrow to start the season off with such a low QBR. I know he's dealing with injuries, and actually, with the win against the Rams, if one underperforming team can turn things around, it would most likely be the Bengals. I just didn't expect them to start this poorly. And last but not least in the AFC is the AFC South. The AFC South has been bizarre. Usually teams with the top picks in the draft are supposed to be terrible and going through growing pains, yet the Colts are on top of the division and the Texans are not too far behind. CJ is having a pretty nice rookie season, and that's not me being a biased Ohio State Buckeye fan. Okay, maybe a little bit, but here's a kind Cam Newton and Justin Herbert. That's good company. But my pick for the most surprising team has got to be the Colts. This team really might win the division, and Anthony Richardson has a promising future as well. I was expecting this season to mainly be about development, but now things are actually looking like it might be off to the races. Good thing they have horseshoes, pun intended. Moving on, we have the NFC, and for the NFC East, I was gonna pick the Giants, but the Cowboys lost to the Cardinals just kinda did it for me. And the Cardinals have been surprising themselves, but we'll save that for later. The Cowboys cannot lose to the Cardinals by double digits. There's no way I'm not going to talk about that. Some say that Dak Prescott is the most overrated starting quarterback in the NFL, and while I probably don't agree 100%, I also don't think that people are outlandish to make such a claim. I'm not the first person to bring up his red zone struggles, and I won't be the last. I kinda don't want to blame that specifically on Dak, since 58% of the red zone plays are rushes and not passes, but on the flip side, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe they just can't trust Dak 20 yards in. And it's not like Dak doesn't have the tools at his disposal to be a great quarterback. He's got a great roster along his side. But hey, I don't want to turn this into a Dak Prescott rant. That probably needs its own video. I think we get the point here. And speaking of those Cardinals, let's move on to the NFC West. The NFC West is really doing the unexpected. I can easily make this segment about either the Rams being terrible or the Cardinals not being as bad as everyone thought. But the Cardinals have just been more interesting for me, because most people were getting ready to expect a historically bad 3-0. In that Giants game specifically, the Giants needed like a 74-year historic comeback just to barely beat the Cardinals. So maybe the Cardinals might be blowing these fourth quarters and tanking on purpose, but if they aren't, and they're just a young team that needs to learn how to close games, this is certainly a surprising team. With the NFC North, the Vikings and the Bears have the same record. Let me say that again. The Vikings and the Bears have the same record. Like, the Bears 0-3, yeah, what's new? But I did not expect a slow start for the Vikings. The Vikings were a 10-4 team last season, and each loss this season so far were by single digits. Less than a touchdown plus an extra point. That's a 3-point loss to the Bucs, a 6-point loss to the Eagles, and a 4-point loss to the Chargers. When games are that close, I think you gotta start pointing fingers at Kevin O'Connell and the whole coaching staff for that matter. Now, KOC has been hinting at mixing up who starts these games, and to think positive, out of the next 3 teams the Vikings face, 2 of them are currently 0-3, being the Bears and Panthers. And speaking of which, the most surprising team in the NFC South is the Panthers going 0-3. This team and most of the sportbooks odds had them to win 7.5 games and be a mediocre team, but with this 0-3 start, they are on pace to be a historically bad team. They have the number 1 pick in the draft with Bryce Young. It's still way too early to say if he is either worse or better than CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson, but man, if you were forced to judge just based on these first 3 games, you can easily make an argument to put Bryce at 3rd place among these 3 quarterbacks. But like I said, it's still way too early to tell. And to be fair, it does seem like Bryce has the least to work with. So he's doing what he can with this roster. So here was my most surprising NFL team from each division so far. Let me know what your most surprising teams are so far and what you think is going to happen for the rest of the season. Don't forget to tackle that like button and subscribe with notifications turned on. I'm Touchdown Rewind, and I'll fast forward to you later.